Hello, this is Mr. Bakar, or Bobby Bakar reporting in. This is my example lesson for programming that I would use with my class. This lesson goes over math. I do teach a small, self-contained special education math class, and we just got done going over, negative and positive numbers, really using negative numbers and how to use those in word problems and different scenarios and how that looks. Just basic negative numbers. So, if I was giving this to students, I would first start off by saying, why are we learning how to code? Well, we've seen coding in STEM classes. The students in my school have experienced this in their elementary schools, and in the STEM room at our school, and sometimes in language arts classes to write a story. But I don't often think that students think that you can use coding for math. That you could almost use it as a way to demonstrate your learning that you have mastered a topic. Well, this is the way. I want students to be able to use coding to show that they learned how to add and subtract positive and negative numbers. I want them to show this by creating a game that asks a user questions, and then the person has to solve the questions. I will be able to see not only that my students have mastered the mathematics skills by having the correct answer as a response for each question, but I'll also be able to see that they were using coding in order to do that and be able to work through the process. This will really help them in the future with different projects they may have for classes, for them to really get some really good exposure to coding. We don't really typically have a computer science class in our middle schools, so this will be perfect. So students, this will be great for you. First thing I want to go over is some of the parts of my expectations for you. You'll notice that the first thing I have here is for the students to say their name. I'm not expecting for you guys to say your name if you're having a code for this. I'm just wanted to do that just so that you could, just so that it logs in who is looking at my code, so I could see that the students have all looked at it. Now, one thing we need to think about is having two actors. You'll see that these are two actors. I'm going to go inside. Let's go inside here. We have two sprites, or they're called actors, also known as actors, that I'm requiring you to use in your project. So you need to use at least two people or two objects. And how you do this is when you're on a blank scratch page or anything, you'll see this sign down here that says choose sprite from library. That's what I want you to do. I want you to use some pre-made sprites that they offer through Scratch. So you click on here, and they give you a wide variety. They give you animals, fantasy, just letters, people, things, transportation. There's themed ones. You can look at all the different types, but you have to have at least two. So each actor has codes. Now, it's up to you how you want your coding to start. You could have it start when this green flag is clicked. That's generally what I want you guys to use at first. It's not a requirement for this project, but you could also just have it when the sprite is clicked. So when I click the football player, you'll notice he asked a question. I click the referee. He gives you some advice. You have to look at events in order to start. So for this code, I've used two different ones. When green flag is clicked and when the sprite is clicked. You have to have some sort of event happening in order to have it start. I would prefer for you guys really only to stick to when green flag clicked or when the sprite is clicked, because otherwise the other stuff I will let you guys do as we go on and we do more coding in the future. So that's how to do actors. Is you use the sprites, and then we go in and we have to have each actor has to have a code. The requirement I have for you guys, one of the requirements is for you to use looping. What I mean by looping is if I go to this, over here I have control. I click here and I see that there's an option to repeat something, have something go on forever. If something happens, then something else happens. There's different options here. I'm requiring for you to use at least two of these in total. You'll notice that I have done this by in a few different ways. First, there's questions, like I said, you have to be asked. I have the football player, once the sprite is clicked, once I click the football player, he's going to ask a question. How I did that was you go to sensing, and there's asking a question. That's all I did. I dragged and typed in my own response. There's a box here, and then it says and wait. Now, if you don't put a code there, it's not gonna. There's nothing's gonna happen. You have to put something else there. You'll notice that I said if. I went to control. I said if, and I know that the problem here, it says a running back starts at 10-yard line, he runs for 30 yards, what yard marker is he at now? So I know that if the answer is 30, which is the correct answer, actually no, it's not. The correct answer is 40. Sorry about that. Whoops, good thing I'm double checking. If the answer is 40, 10 yards plus 30 yards is 40, then the football player will say correct. So let's try it out. I get a point. You'll notice that a point goes on. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if the answer is 40, then it will say correct. Also, if you didn't get anything, if there was a different answer than 40, it would say, I am sorry, the correct answer is 40, as this will say. And then it will tell you to go to the referee. So let's walk. I kind of want to go through this again. So there's a new question here. The ball is on the 20-yard line, and the quarterback loses 5 yards on a play. What is the ball on now? So the answer is 15, but for our sake, I want to give this a try. Let's say I accidentally added it. It's at 25. You'll notice a point went down, and it goes to another question. So one thing I want you guys to think about is this variable here. I've talked about if then. You'll see that, if answer is this, then it will say correct or it will say incorrect. It will change the points. I want us to think about then this variable that you'll see. So variable, I want you guys to have points that are being tracked or something being tracked throughout the game. How you do this and how you create this variable over here is there's an orange box called data. And you'll see here it says make a variable. I made one for points, so you would type in something. You could use it for just one sprite or for all sprites. It really doesn't matter. I don't have a preference either way. As long as if a question is answered correct, a point goes up. And if a question is answered wrong, it goes down. So once you create a variable, you can click this check box and it will appear here. If I unclick it, it doesn't appear. If I click it, it appears. I want you guys to have it here so someone knows how their score is going. So that makes a variable. How do I have the variable really matter? So you'll see that once we asked the question, we did an if-then statement. We have the answer being 40. Once it's said correct, you'll see that if I click back on the data, I could change it, the points up, down, by 1, 2, any amount of number, any number, or I could change it downwards. I could have it go down negative numbers. You could even have the variable go up at certain times. I'm not going to have that necessarily take place right now. I just want you guys to use the change or even setting a variable if you want to give them a starting score. That's the main component for this assignment. I want you to be able to have an if-then statement for and then having someone say correct or incorrect and have the points here change. So I will go over the rubric in just a second, but you have to have the loops, you have to have if-then statements, and you have to have at least this one variable. You'll notice that I do have a code at the end that just says thank you for playing. So that way the user knows when they're done. So that way they're not just sitting idle when the last question's written. That way if it says thank you for playing, they know the game is over and they can log off, or they can click the referee. So, like I said, we have two actors. We have looping, we have if-then statements, and you could also use, if you want to get gutsy, I'm allowing you guys to also use just normal if-thens or forevers or repeaters. I don't personally like using them for this because it is questions are to keep going. If you were to have music or something play, or if you wanted the score to keep going up for some reason, you could use a forever statement or a repeat statement. For this assignment, though, I want at least those if-thens, and if you want to get fancy, you can. Some of you guys may have more experience with coding than others. All right, so the other actor, the referee. I want the referee or whoever you're going to use to be someone that gives tips. We're going to assume that, we're still learning this math stuff. If we gave this to a friend of ours in class, they're going to struggle still at times. So I want you to be able to give this person tips. Simple tips, just something that, a tip for them to look back at a worksheet or to, use a calculator or look at a number line. So I want you to have the actor, introduce himself and say that he's someone that's going to give you tips. I made a joke and say he's a math magician. Really, he's just a referee and that's it. And then, he'll ask a question. Do you need help with adding and subtracting positive or negative numbers? Now, it's very specific. You have to type in the exact word with lowercase, positive, negative. when I was making this demo for you guys, I had it be positive with a capital P, and then when I wrote the answer here, down here when it pops up, you'll see, if I type in with a capital, it still works. It didn't work when I did it earlier, but you have to be very specific. You have to spell it correctly. If you don't, I would write down the instructions and tell the player that they have to write it specifically. Now, depending on how you answer, whether you say you need help with positive or negative, that will give a tip for you. I want your tip to be referencing something else, maybe saying, what way they should be going in their head. If it's a football player, they are on the 10-yard line, you say that they lost 5 yards, maybe say they are going backwards. That will help someone remember that they're going backwards, they'll be going down, not up, and you can also tell them to reference a number line. Same thing with positive numbers, just give some sort of tips. It should be at least a sentence in length. So, we've gone over the actors, looping, if-then, and creating a variable. Now I want to finally wrap it up by going over this rubric that I have for you. This rubric, the whole thing is worth 30 points. The whole assignment is worth 30 points. So it's a pretty big assignment. It's the end of our unit project. So there's a bunch of different categories. First things first, I want you guys to be able to have those two actors. Both actors have to have at least one if-then statement. So there has to be at least two if-then statements in total. You'll notice that I have 2 if-then statements for the referee, and the football player has a bunch because he asks a few questions. He has 1, 2, 3. Well, he only has 3. In total, I have 5. I'm only requiring you guys to have 2 in total with 1 if-then statement per person. I will I will consider extra credit if you have more than 1. I'll do that by a case-by-case basis. The 2 actors are different characters, so I don't want to have you have the same football player just twice. I want you to actually use 2 different sprites from here. Whether they be people or creatures or objects, it's fine. I don't have a preference. So you'll notice that I have it broken down by 3 points, 1 point, 0 points. 0 points means you obviously didn't have any actors, you never turned the assignment, whatever. 3 points would be you have 1 actor or both actors are there, 1's missing a if-then statement, and then 1 point would be no coding. One thing I forgot to mention is a backdrop. When you do a new Scratch project, there's a backdrop you can choose. That you do down here. It's a requirement. So that could be the first thing you do. There's this icon right here that looks like mountains. I want you to choose a backdrop for your project. I want the backdrop to be involving your game. If your game is a baseball game, I want you to have a baseball background. If it's playground and you're doing Foursquare, you're doing some game that involves the playground, use that. If you're going to say it's like beach volleyball, I'd be okay with a boardwalk and just pretending that there is a net there. You have to have some legitimate backdrop for your game, like a legit reason why. Like, for instance, this isn't exactly a football field. It looks like a soccer field, but it's close enough. It matches a game. You're not going to find the exact thing you're looking for, but you'll find something like it. I mean, whether it be, a game that involves Jeopardy, you could have like it be in like the building of MIT, which is a college, or something like that. It could be anything you want, any kind of game. If you have questions about that, you can get approval from me. So that's on the rubric as well. That's the next thing on the rubric. Student uses a background that fits their story. The backdrop was found on the Scratch website. I want you to use one of the pre-approved ones that are on this icon here. To lose points for that, a student would use a backdrop unrelated to their game or one that they just found and it wasn't approved by me. 1 point, there really is no way to get 1 point, and then 0 is just no backdrop. Variable, like I said, you have to have a variable, and that variable must go up if the answer is correct, or go down if there's a question wrong. You'll lose points if you're either missing positive or negative. Like, let's say you have only points going up and not down, you get some points off. Or if you have a variable present but nothing makes sense, like it doesn't go up at all, you get up 1 point for at least attempting to make a variable. And if you don't include one, it's just a 0. Last but not least, we do have 3 categories. We have questions. Like I said, there are at least 2 questions you're asking the user, and the score is affected by this answer. I want you to have, at minimum, 2 questions that the football player or one of the characters is going to ask, or actors is going to ask, and that will affect the variable, aka the score. You'll get points off if you only include 1, or the score doesn't get affected by the question being answered. You'll get only 1 point if the question has no way for the user to respond. So you ask a question, and for some reason you did it in like a text box, like in the looks, instead of asking in the sensing. You'll get a point off for that, or some points off for that. And then if you don't ask any questions, it's obviously a 0. 2 categories left. There's tips. One of the actors has to have at least 2 tips that they can provide the user. You'll notice that the referee has those. The referee has, do you have positive, a positive tip or a negative tip? Those kind of things. You need to have at least 2 tips in total. If you only have 1 or there's no response after an answer, that will be some points off. That'll be 2 points off. That'll make it 3 points. And then if you only have 1 point, no tip is present, but a question is presented for answering, that's fine. You have a question, but you're leaving the user just there. Or 0 points, you don't have any tips. Last but not least, the last category is neatness. So coding is easy to follow, and 2 notes are included for me to see why they chose certain codes. I want you to be able to click and write a note over here. How you do that is you right-click and you say Add Comment. So when you're done, the last thing you should do, go through your codes, and at least in 2 spots, I want you to add a comment about why you chose a certain code. The comment box is over here. If I zoom out, you can write a note for me to look at, just why you chose the question you did, or something like that, just something that you think you need to explain. You need to have at least 2 notes. If you need help with figuring out what you want on those notes, just let me know. You'll get points off if the coding is hard to follow. Some parts do not connect properly. Let's say, you click on the green. If I click on the green and it says it will start and it doesn't start, maybe you forgot it's accidentally removed. It was like this. It's off to the side and you just forgot to drag it over. Something like that. It's got to be clean. 1 point if the coding does not work and is extremely hard to follow, meaning let's say you forgot to connect a lot and there's more than 1 mistake. That'll be only 1 point. And then you'll get a 0 if you don't have any coding present. So please, please, please let me know if you need any help. There are certain parts of this rubric that bounce off each other. For instance, if you don't have any coding, you're not just going to get a 0 down here. You're going to get a 0 in a lot of other spots too. I'm here to help. I have this rubric, and I also have a math standard that is going to be met. This will be posted on the page. Thank you for listening.